Step two, this is the step this is like, in my opinion, the next critical step, user segmentation and prioritization. And I'll say this, and I have it in the slides in a few places, I think. The better your segmentation, the better your problems, the better your solutions. If you have a very broad segmentation, you're going to have not very interesting problems, and then your solutions are going to be pretty banal. So let's talk about this. So user segmentation and prioritization. What do you want to do? You want to identify the user group that can help you validate the product idea. What you want to understand here is, what is the overall ecosystem that you're entering? What should you focus on within that ecosystem, and how do you prioritize? What are the pitfalls? Like in the story about the girl that was looking at the beds, one bed was too large, one bed was too small, and then there was one, the Goldilocks, right? You can have segmentation that's too high level or too detailed. In many cases, people build for themselves and not for a prioritized target audience. And then you prioritize without explaining why. And then a pro tip here, prioritizing using top-down segmentation. And I'm going to go through this in the next slide. And as I said earlier, good segmentation gives you good problems, gives you good solutions, or at least increases the likelihood of it. Now, one thing I want to say here before we go into the next slide, and then I'll open it for questions. We often get a question that is, how would you improve your favorite product? I personally think this question is a trap. Why is it a trap? Because people want to build for themselves. We are not representative of the population. If it were up to people like us, and this is something they teach you at Meta's bootcamp, Facebook Marketplace wouldn't exist. Because when the idea of Facebook Marketplace came, the product managers and the designers and the engineers didn't understand who would want to use it, right? We are not the population. If you want to do well, you want to show that you can see the market, that you can identify the core users, that you can identify their problems, and you can identify their solutions, and not just build for yourself. It doesn't mean the building for yourself doesn't work. Many great companies were built that way. But once you're interviewing for a company, you need to remember that you are not necessarily representative of their audience. Okay? Okay, let's talk about top-down segmentation. So user segmentation and prioritization, what does it mean? You can use the same airspace when you're talking to show the big pie and how you're going to slice it, right? So you go from the big pie, you show that you can see things holistically, and then you tell me, okay, this is important to me. And you explain to me why. And then you go to this piece, and then you say, you know what? This piece isn't clear enough for me yet, or it's not well defined enough yet. So I'm going to prioritize this piece inside, right? So you want to show the interviewer how they slice the overall pie. Then you want to prioritize the most important slice of the pie. And then you want to refine and define within that slice. People who are in consulting or did consulting interviews, that's a lot of what goes into that. But this is, my opinion, a very good way to make sure you're segmenting well enough. Kashmiri, you have a question.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. Yeah, my question is regarding the previous question you were speaking of, the favorite product question. So you did mention that we should approach it like from the user perspective. How about uh, the question when the interviewer asks you, what is your favorite product and why? Should that be not personal and it should be more from the user perspective? Like, how do you go
That's a
about that?
great question. I think when somebody asks you what's your favorite product and why, it's great for you to give your own opinion. If you can give it for a broader set of users, that's better. I was talking about the follow-up question to the what's your favorite product and why, which is 5 times out of 8, I think you're going to get the follow-up of how you would improve it. It was more on the improvement side.
Okay. So when you have the follow-up question, that's when you switch the hat and look from the
Yeah.
broader perspective. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like if somebody asks me what's my favorite product, I'm probably going to say the tonal, which is right behind me because I'm a fitness junkie and it remembers my weight adjustments, and it's better than a mirror because it has weights and the mirror doesn't have them. That's my reason, and I can create my own programs. But if somebody asks me how I would improve it, I would probably not use myself because I'm probably a power user of it and I'm not necessarily who they're targeting in general. Maybe I'm who they're targeting, but I might not be representative because I figured out all the little kinks and how to game that system. Okay.
Okay. Makes sense.
So top-down segmentation allows you, like, why am I spending time on showing you these pie charts? To something that I learned when I was actually preparing for consulting interviews, not even for product interviews. When you take a problem and you break it down this way, it demonstrates a holistic understanding and focused prioritization. And 9 times out of 10, when I'm talking about segmentation that isn't interesting enough or is too detailed or too high level, the too detailed would be just going into these little slices without telling you know what the overall pie is. And too high level might mean that you're just looking at this pie, like just as like the pink versus the gray. Okay. Okay, I want to talk about common segmentation approaches because I think people get stuck on this a bit. So I want to give you a few ideas of how to segment. And I'm sure there are 100 other ways you can segment. And you can also mix and match like it's a bathing suit. But marketplace, buyers and sellers. And in the use case of Uber Eats or DoorDash, you also have couriers. Media, you have content creators and content consumers, and you also have the advertisers. And in social media, you can also say the social network of the users if you want to. Geographic, you can think about cities versus rural versus suburban. And technology users, you can think about the adoption curve. And then additional demographic approach, you can use, additional approaches, you can use the demographic approach, you can use a psychographic approach, you can use behavioral patterns, and in industry or sectors, you can use verticals or size of business. And if you remember, we're actually focused on a vertical right now, right? We're focused on the healthcare vertical, and Yelp is focused predominantly on small, medium businesses. So we're already doing this to an extent in this question. Alan, yes, you have a question.
What about needs-based segmentation? Like people toss that phrase
Yeah, you can
around
do
a
that.
bunch.
I
Should
left
we
that
just like
out.
make up a bunch of
Yeah,
things that
I'm
people
just
might
giving you.
like?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that can be behavioral patterns, for example, or it
That's
can
true.
be psychographic. I am not saying I found everything here. And you can convince me that there are many other ways to segment it as well. I'm just trying to give you the most common ones.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
For anything I'm doing here, I am sure there are many other ways and probably better ones. I'm just trying to find a common denominator for us, okay? So as I said, this isn't a comprehensive list. I'm just highlighting
I
very
keep
common
jumping ahead. I'm
segmentation.
sorry.
No, don't be. And I feel like maybe you read my deck and you're helping me figure out how to move things along between my mouse and my keyboard. Awesome. Let's keep going. Okay, common prioritization approaches. And I'm putting this up here now, and I won't touch this again later, even when we go, like, we'll touch this a bit more in detail in the solution space when we're doing RICE. But for now, RICE is the most popular one. Reach, impact, confidence, and effort. I don't know why the effort is in brackets. Oh, I know why the effort is in brackets. Effort is in brackets because it's mostly used for solutions, but you can also use it in audience in terms of how hard is it to reach that audience. And then additional approaches you can think about, RFM, like recency, frequency, monetary value, needs-based segmentation, meaning you want to, I wanted to call this prioritization, not segmentation. But I'm just going to correct this here. Because sometimes you want to, you identify an unserved market that would need it more. Maybe there's a market gap analysis that's similar. Maybe there's a brand value affiliation. And then there's also the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rules. I'll give you an example for this, actually. I was working on Facebook dating. That was actually my favorite product to work at while I was at Meta. And dating users tended to be 60% male and 40% female, but a like initiated by a woman was worth 10 times that of a like initiated by a man. And for a few halves, our strategy was based on improving the experience for women. Even though there were fewer women on the platform, they were more valuable for the ecosystem success. So it's not that you always need to select the biggest one. Maybe you want to select the ones that if you reach them, the impact will be high. Okay. So these are a few prioritization approaches. You can convince me that there are other ones similar to segmentation. You can mix and match. Just make sure that in every step of the way, you apply the same approach, that you, for each level, you apply the same approach, okay? I will also say you don't need to force a prioritization approach for segmentation, but make sure you have a clear way to explain why you're doing something. You can also mix and match them. I'll give you an example. I was doing an interview. I think it was 2 years ago. I was doing an interview. I was the candidate. And the interview, I won't say the name of the company. Some people in this room know because I told them, but I won't say it in public. And the interviewer really really wanted me to use rice in every step of the way. I gave him my thing and he really wanted me to use rice. So I used rice, even though I didn't think rice was the right approach for it, but it's fine. It didn't make me like that interviewer very much, but and that's part of being coachable. He asked me to do something, so I did it. Fine. Okay. So let's take 2 minutes and for you guys to think about how would you segment the problem for Yelp wanting to bring healthcare providers into the market. I feel like somebody was going to ask a question or somebody unmuted for a second. No. Okay. So let's take 2 minutes and think a bit about how we want to segment. Okay. So in the interest of time, going to give my suggestion for prioritization. You can convince me there are better ways. The highest level first, it's a marketplace dynamic. I'm also taking into consideration external stakeholders. I have patients, healthcare providers, and external stakeholders. I am taking a double segmentation approach, a double layered segmentation approach for both patients and healthcare providers. I am not expecting you to do that in an interview. In a real interview, I just want to show you a few different ways of segmenting. In a real interview, I would pick one and just go down that road and really listen to the interviewer's cues to see if they're curious to see something else, okay? So things that I do here that are a bit extra, and we'll do that in the problems and solutions as well, just know that I want to give you more options of things to think about. And in a real interview, I would probably do less, so you don't freak out. Okay, so I'm thinking about patients, and that's where I want to focus on. I'm thinking now about some sort of a demographic segmentation. So I'm thinking about singles or couples without kids, families that are households, and maybe elderly. My hypothesis is, and I'll go through how I come up with this later, but my hypothesis is I want to focus on the families first. Then in families, I want to think about whether you're first-time parents or whether you're experienced parents. Me, myself, by the way, I don't have kids, so I don't know much about this. So you'll have to forgive me, those of you who do. But my assumption is that if you're a first-time parent, you probably need more information, and maybe you don't have a support system than an experienced person, an experienced parent. And then within the first-time parent, I can think about parents with a support system and parents without a support system, and I'll assume that parents without a support system will probably need this more. So this is kind of like my prioritization. Give me 1 second, Kashmira. I want to go through all of this and then I'll answer your question because I have a slide on the prioritization as well. So this is how I go through it. In a real interview, I think that going down this layer is good enough. I think that sticking to this layer is still not detailed enough. I don't necessarily expect the candidate to go to the no support system versus the yes support system. I think here is good, but again, I want to show you a bit going a bit deeper, okay? Then on healthcare providers, I'm not going to go, but I'm thinking about established reputation versus no established reputation. That ties also nicely with Yelp's mission to help small, medium businesses. So maybe they can establish their reputation here, and then maybe they're medical or non-medical because that might help me. I'm not actually going deeper than that, but I just wanted to show another segmentation approach. And then for the external stakeholders that I'm putting in, this is more jotting it down to make sure I don't leave anything out. I'm not actually, this might come up later, but I'm thinking about maybe insurance or admins. Okay. Then, you know, for yourself at home, try different types of segmentations. Think about maybe you have patients' health. Maybe you want to think about healthcare verticals. See how your problems and solutions change. Because when your segmentation approach changes, your segmentation is going to change. So I selected patients. I already said that before. And I now want to show you why did I choose first-time parents. So I used Rice, and I'll show you a detailed example of comparing one-to-one on Rice. But I'll just say here that probably families are the ones, and it's a bit of like Rice and focusing mostly on the reach and impact side, meaning singles or couples with no kids, probably I could be convinced that maybe that's the right approach because they just moved, you know, just moved to the city and they don't know what doctor to go to, and they already use Yelp to figure out where to go to brunch. So I could also think about that, but maybe the impact there is lower. I think families, that's where doctor routines start becoming more of a monthly or bi-monthly thing. Then I'm thinking about first-time parents as needs-based plus the strategic fit to land on this. And then first-time parents without a support system is definitely need-based. So this isn't a perfect prioritization, but I just wanted to show you that I can take different layers of segmentations and approaches between the different, every time I skip a layer, I can look at it a bit differently maybe to kind of like narrow down, or I can just use the same framework across all of it. And then Kashmira had a question beforehand.
Yes, hi. So I have, and I'm sorry if you've already explained this, but I have problems when you have segmentation when in two-sided or three-sided network, right? So this is a two-sided network where it's a patient and you have a healthcare provider. In this kind of marketplace, both the sides are kind of are a positive reinforcement for each other. Like the more patients you have, the more healthcare providers you will have, and if the more healthcare providers you have, you will have more patients on the platform.
Correct.
So with both being equally important to have growth on both sides, how do you choose only patients over healthcare provider when you are coming up with a solution? What justification do you give?
So my assumption is you have more patients than healthcare providers. So maybe I want to start with them. I know it's a chicken and an egg, and maybe I already have the healthcare providers on the system and they just aren't discovered enough yet, or people don't know how to find them. So then I would focus on patients. But looking at Yelp, for example, when I was like playing with the app, I was like, oh, there are some healthcare providers there. So it's just a question of what you want to put in first. But that's where I think the I think that there's already a lot of people using the app as consumers. And if you build this, then a lot of this will also need to bring that ecosystem to life. I'm trying to think of good examples where I would start with the healthcare providers. Trying to think about it. I think in my example that I have I'm trying to think about a good example where I would start with the healthcare providers. It's actually interesting. Like one of my first jobs in tech was at Fiverr, I was one of the first 15 people at Fiverr. And, it's a marketplace for buyer and seller, if anybody knows it. And it was actually very interesting to see, but once you have enough people in demand, then the sellers will come and the better sellers will come as well. But I think between here, the side of the marketplace you want to focus on, it also indicates the experience in a bit of a backward way for the healthcare provider. But I think if you just think about the pure volume, you have more patients than healthcare providers, and maybe the healthcare providers, by giving them more visibility, more of them will come. If people will start using it more healthcare providers will come. And that's a bit more maybe in the plan for go-to-market. I think that's a good place to say, I'm focusing on the patients right now, but in my go-to-market plan, I'll need to make sure that I'm reaching out to healthcare providers so that the platform has enough healthcare providers to provide the needs for my patients. Evelyn.
Yes. I have a question about a question that was asked previously. I think it was from Alan about use and like use cases. So when you asked us to do the segmentation, actually I came up with something slightly different. Granted, there's no right or wrong answer. How I wanted to segment was based on their needs. So I was thinking about when people are looking for healthcare professionals, there's the routine checkup, there's the emergency, and then there's the long-term treatment. I wanted to get your take on
That's a wonderful way to segment. You can do that. By the way, patient's health, it looks like it's very similar to this.
Yeah.
You can do that for sure. What you want to make sure of is that you think about both the patients and the healthcare providers. From there, you can convince me. It's up to you to convince me that the patients are more important than the healthcare providers. Or I can be convinced that the healthcare providers are more important than the patients. This also goes to Kashmira's point before. There isn't one right way. It's your ability to justify it. So in my rice, it's probably easier for me to get to the people on the platform than it is to start finding all of the healthcare providers and making a value statement for them, right? I think someone else had a question, maybe Charu?
Oh, I was just going to make a comment on that.
Yeah, go for it.
I was wondering, might there be an aspect of if you were building a marketplace from scratch, you might want to bring the sellers first?
Yes, and that's what I was thinking out loud, what we did at Fiverr, but it was 12 years ago and I can't remember. But yes, if you're building a marketplace first, you probably want to bring the sellers in. But my assumption is that there are some healthcare providers on Yelp already. For example, you already have massage therapists, physical therapists. So how do you bring that up? And then you can also, building that initial marketplace, by the way, one could argue that that's a marketing thing. It's a part of go-to-market and not necessarily a part of the product, right? It's something to think about. I think that Charu says makes sense, if I understand that. Joseph.
I had a question. This is more tactical. So when you apply RISE, there are 4 dimensions within RISE.
Yes.
And then I see some people would go, let's evaluate for reach and go, this is high, this is high, this is low.
Yeah. I'll do that later.
So, when you're doing this in this particular instance, are you in your head just summarizing based on RISE?
Yes, I would just summarizing. Yeah. So for me, if I'm looking at RISE and I'm doing RISE for the first layer, reach is the size of your audience, right? I have more patients than healthcare providers. Impact, if I think I can make an impact on, I think the impact and the confidence and the efforts are where it gets a bit tricky. The impact is, I think if I am able to provide a good experience for the patients, then I think it will drive bigger impact for the platform. right? It's a brand new service that they don't have, so I can drive impact. My confidence is pretty high for this, I think, because I have other tabs and I already have some of these providers. And then my effort is pretty low because I already have these people on the platform. Like my assumption is that these people are on. By the way, singles, couples, no kids, I could be convinced that these ones are easier to reach than maybe the families. I'm just making this up because it's like people who use Yelp in many cases are urban populations. And if they're already, you know, using Yelp to go out for brunch, they might use it to find a doctor. Maybe my confidence is actually a bit lower for families, right? And for elderly, I'm pretty sure that for them, it will be harder for me to reach. It will be harder for me to get to them. So that's the E in the effort. Their number is a bit smaller. And the impact, they probably already have their healthcare professionals already embedded and set up, right? Because by the time you're 65, you already know who your primary care doctor is. You already know what hopefully you don't have new ones, but if you have new ones, then your primary healthcare provider is there. You don't really move around a lot, right? So then let's think about healthcare providers. Reach, it's a smaller audience, right? Impact, I'm not sure that they're that motivated to join. Maybe they have ZocDoc, maybe they have the insurance directories. I'm not sure. I can drive a lot of impact for them, especially the ones that don't have a lot of that haven't established their reputations yet, right? So then I'm thinking about, established reputation or not established reputation. And if they don't have established reputation, by the way, if I'm taking this all the way, if they don't have an established reputation, it will be much harder for me to get the patients for them, right? So the effort is probably going to be higher. So that's kind of like how I'm applying RICE. I'm going to do very detailed RICE in the solution section. So to save time, I just wanted to show the point here. Because I think I actually, when I think usually, if I'm very honest, when I'm thinking about the segmentation, I usually think about reach and impact more so than the confidence and the effort. But I learned in that interview that I needed to think about the confidence and the effort as well. So you learn new things every day. Okay. So I'm tying it up with the hypothesis. So every time I try to refine my hypothesis. So Yelp can help new parents without support find the trustworthy healthcare providers. That's my hypothesis at this point. We can talk about how we measure